Welcome to the Mr. R Show, presented by the MRR Institute. This podcast is designed specifically for tax professionals looking to scale and modernize their practice by maximizing revenue through resources. Join us as we explore expert strategies, innovative tools, and actionable advice to help you navigate the evolving landscape of the tax industry. Whether you're aiming to grow your business or enhance your client experience, you're in the right place. Now, let's get to the show and transform your practice together.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Mr. R Show, brought to you here by the MRR Institute. So as always, anybody who's listened to this here in the past, now we're crossing milestones here, episode 20 and beyond. We've touched on so many aspects on how to really grow and optimize your tax pro business. So when we say that, actually anything in your firm, obviously we try to touch all these corners. And the one thing that we haven't talked a lot about is marketing and branding, and how to actually kind of expand beyond your current borders, we should say, not necessarily geographic borders, maybe proverbial borders. Maybe it's a niche or something you're trying to get out there, trying to attract a new audience. Maybe even it's just retaining clients, getting more clients that are like the ones you already have. It all comes down to marketing, which then comes down to sales and relationship building. So as always, Chris Picciurro, I wouldn't be able to do this show without you, sir. So welcome back. How are you?
Thank you. Oh, it's going great. Thanks for asking. Happy to be back on the show. Very excited about our special guest today. So, John, you're not stuck with me for the next hour, gabbing about something or another. And very excited about our special guest. I agree. In today's world, if you are a tax or accounting firm owner, or if you are, you might be listening to this as a team member. Maybe you're getting your continuing education, and you kind of have aspirations of either being having your own practice, or you could be maybe you could be a change agent for your own practice. Maybe you're working somewhere that there's some maybe more experienced or mature age tax professionals in ownership, and you're that next generation of owner coming through the pipeline. So I always say to John, and with our practice and our private CPA practice, the internet is our showroom, right? We don't have typically the offices, and people don't come in the office as much. So how do we differentiate ourselves? How do we always say, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So how do you create a culture and a brand and a voice that exemplifies yourself if you're a sole practitioner, or your team if you've got an amazing team? Because a lot of times I could tell just with my own, obviously we have our mastermind group, and I've been doing some coaching and little getting to know tax professionals all over the country. Probably the biggest challenge, and John, you kind of see this too from the on your end, as we've traveled together. But one of the biggest challenges for a tax professional or an accounting professional that owns their own practice is they tend to gripe about certain clients, right? And ultimately, your firm and your practice is gonna run how you engineered it. So if you don't have a proper client acquisition process, if your clients aren't aligned with your offerings and your kind of your culture or your fiber of your firm, then you're going to end up with clients that aren't a great fit, and many times you feel stuck with them. So I know that's a long-winded answer when you're just saying hello.
No, it's
All that
perfect.
to say, I'm
It is
really
perfect.
excited to have Scott Cytron joining us. We have worked together for quite a few years now. Scott and his team work with the biggest players out there as clients in the accounting and tax field. And he owns a marketing, public relations, communication firm, really geared, in my opinion, to help obviously he helps a lot of other people, but tax professionals. And we got introduced by a mutual friend, and I'm excited to have him. We had to pull some strings to get him on. But Scott, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me.
So, tell us a little bit about your history, how you came to get into marketing, public relations, and how you kind of got into working with a lot of tax professionals and accounting professionals.
Sure. Well, I appreciate you all having me on. My firm will actually be 30 years old this Thanksgiving, which is longer than most of my relationships. So I'm pretty proud of that. I work with my son. He's worked with me for 11 years
Wow.
already. And yeah, couldn't do this without him. His name is Brian, and the clients love him more than they love me. So I'm maybe doing something right with that. Um, I was first and foremost, a writer and editor. And when I graduated journalism school, way, way back, I won't tell you how long, but it's been a few years, I wanted to be a magazine editor.
Mm.
And then I realized I had to eat. So I decided that I had to do something. And that year, the job market was pretty tight. I looked for work. I went to University of Missouri, Columbia, and looked for work in Kansas City because I was actually dating somebody at the time who lived in KC, which was not a good reason to stay in KC. So I came back. I couldn't find a job up there. I actually one time applied to be a Hallmark card writer. They recruited pretty heavily at Mizzou, and the test, we everybody had to do a test, and you had to do a poem for a sympathy card. You had to do a poem for a new pet, anniversary. No, the sky's the limit, and of course, I failed that terribly. So I didn't end up being a Hallmark card writer, but moved back to Dallas, which is where I was from, born and raised, and looked for work for a while. Couldn't really find anything. So I actually volunteered my time at the United Way. And when I did that, I remember my mother saying, "Why the, you know what, are you wasting your time with a nonprofit with no chances of having an interview?" And I said, "Well, I think it's going to lead to something." And it did. It got me a job at the American Red Cross. And I was assistant PR director, and I was making a whole $12,000 a year. Thought I had died and gone to heaven. So to make the trip a little bit shorter for you, through the years, I've worked for various nonprofits. That was really where my interest was at the very beginning, was working for nonprofits. I even looked at starting an agency, a PR agency, only working with nonprofits, and couldn't really get the math to work on that. So I ended up going into working for a PR agency kind of in between there, where I kind of got my roots pretty well sown on the media side of the business. I was already a writer, so I needed some experience on how to place news releases, how to work with the media, the PR side of the business, and developed that. Eventually went to work for the Texas Society of CPAs. So everybody is curious about why I know what I know about accounting and tax, and it's because of that. I worked with them just shy of 9 years and was head of internal marketing. So I did all the marketing for the CPE program. I did the membership marketing, did the annual report, did the annual meeting. I had a staff of, I think at one time I had 10 reporting to me, which was way more than I ever wanted. Before I thought I was a lousy manager the whole way, but it turned out okay, and was bounced out through a layoff. And so I cried for quite a few days because I was one of those people that never thought I would be laid off ever. And I was. And some friends gave me some really good advice. They said, look, you can continue to wallow in this misery, or you can do something about it. And I did. And so got some really good advice too from others who said, look, you've been networking with people for years, helping them find work, find gigs, engagements. Call on your network. Let them know what you're doing. Let everybody know what you want to do. And the issue was I really didn't know what I wanted to do, but I got a couple of calls from vendors I had worked with when I was at the TSCPA, because I ran the affinity program, the kind of the credit card program, the home mortgage program, any incentives for members. And I got called by the financial arm of what was back then MBNA America, which ended up being Bank of America eventually. And their whole goal was to sell more affinity cards to nonprofits and associations, like the wildlife card or the Girl Scout card or whatever branded card that is. So they brought me up once a week for 6 months to Boston to work with their staff, to let them know, kind of train them on how nonprofits thought and worked and associations worked. And so that was a good gig. And I had gotten one other thing in the meantime. And I thought, well, if I could just be busy through like the next 6 months, I could try to make this work. In other words, just pay bills. Don't do anything else, but just get the bills paid. And it worked out. Uh, I did a lot of accounting work at the beginning, a lot of tax and accounting work because of my background. And then, thought, well, I don't want to be pigeonholed as the accounting guy. So I actually did a lot of healthcare, a lot of local healthcare, as it turned out. Yeah. Some really interesting work that I still think is interesting, and enjoyed that a lot. I did some B2C work, and I worked for Blockbuster. I did some work for Pizza Hut, uh, which was based here, and just kind of a lot of really diverse gigs doing marketing, PR, and communications. But the accounting piece kept coming back to me, and I always tell people I'm like the Godfather, where I got pulled back in, and I did. And so around the 8th or ninth year, I thought, okay, I'll just kind of stick with accounting, but I'll look for other work if I can get in other industries. And that's paid off over the years. People think I'm a content subject matter expert. I guess I am to a degree, so I can't really do a tax return, but I can sure talk about it and write about it. So, you know, uh, I think our agency has been very successful over the years. And I really do say that, and I'm knocking on wood, because we treat our clients like they're our friends. And there's a fine line you have to draw, certainly, between, the real relationship you have with your clients. But my best day I have ever is when a client will call me and say, I've got a problem. Can you help me solve it? And that's where the intuitiveness, the experience, just kind of knowing the industry and knowing how to work with clients and how they can work with their clients really comes in. And I'm very proud of that. Uh, Nowadays, we do a lot of we still do a lot of PR and marketing. We do as much writing as we always have. We do a lot of editing still. We probably do less media relations than we used to. I'm on a like all of my colleagues in PR that work with accountants. We're on a first name basis with all the trade editors, trade publication editors. If a client said to me, can you help us get into the construction trades? Sure, I can do that. I have to do some research for it, but I can make that happen. So
So obviously, so you're
basically,
work.
it's
Oh, I'm sorry.
no, I was going to say basically it's a journey along the way, and we're still learning every day.
No, absolutely. And one of the things I picked up on was we talk about I mean, gosh, I talk about it with my kids all the time, and we talk about in MRR with tax pros is, bitter or better, right? So you can when you're laid off, none of us imagine we were laid off, and we're kind of that generation where, uh, you know, being laid off seems you feel like a failure, right? That's like, oh my gosh, the worst thing that could happen, and just the mentality. And I don't think people, so it's but you got ultimately you were bitter for maybe a couple of days, it sounds like, but you got better, and there's we, another thing to think about is win or learn, right? It's, if you kind of try to keep that mentality that you didn't lose, you're learning again, we win more, we learn more from losing than winning, but, just, yeah, that's pretty cool because you're able to bounce back and take you down a completely different path here. So, um,
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if I hadn't been laid off, I think at one point I remember thinking, I'm going to run the TSCPA. Like, I'm going to be executive director. I'm going to be the president, because I had a pretty interesting career there, uh, doing lots of different things. If I said I wanted to do something, they would let me do it. And it wasn't a very defined role. It was more, yeah, go and do it. If you think it's going to be increased membership or going to help the members, go do that. And I really thought I was in line to take it over. I actually, at one point, interviewed to be executive director of the Dallas chapter of TSCPA, which back then, I don't remember how many members they had, but it was a lot. And I made it to the final panel interview and didn't get it because I wasn't a CPA. They ended up hiring somebody that was, and I totally understand that.
And Scott, I think too, it's, you mentioned earlier on too about your background being, doing Pizza Hut and, some of these other places. I mean, I've always felt this way. So probably for 20 years, it's such a benefit when people have those experiences, right? Different industries, different markets, different positions in different industries. And then kind of your role now, skipping ahead, into the PR, media and marketing world. It's let me backtrack a little bit. I've always said some of the best marketers I've met in my life and have ever worked for me when I had an agency actually had a law degree, but never practiced law. And it was almost their train of thinking is something that is much harder to teach them than the concepts of marketing and sales, right? So in your case, I think that's fantastic because I think now you probably have a better understanding, right, of consumer behavior, et cetera. And now you can take that, like you mentioned, like your niche for some of the part, right, is with CPAs and the financial world, right? And then you mentioned the construction trade. They're polar opposites, but yet I'm sure, like you said, do a little research. You know enough to what to look for in those industries that then you start connecting the dots. And I mean, some of the conversations we've had with tax professionals, I think, Chris, I don't know if you can attest to this or not, but some of them kind of accidentally find their niche by way of just kind of stumbling upon it, or sometimes they go out and seek it. And I always find that super interesting, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I completely agree with that. I mean, to me, a niche is really pursuing your passion. So if you really hate working with construction, or you really don't like working with, what's another example, retail, don't do it. Why would you put yourself through that torture? Yet if you like, if you have a hobby, let's say, what would a good example of a hobby be? Maybe
I'm not saying
Maybe you
pickleball.
maybe you enjoy sailing or that. So work with an industry that's associated with that kind of business. I mean, it's as simple as that because you already understand the industry. So it's a matter of, okay, how do I find those clients that are in that niche so I can really, give them some of my institutional memory and knowledge to help them grow.
Well, I mean, the Tennessee's or not Tennessee, the Tex same and the Texas Society of CPAs is a huge organization, and and I think that that definitely helped you out a lot with that. And John and I work a lot with different associations now, doing continuing ed or getting involved as much as we can. Um, so let's talk about for tax and accounting pros how to let's say you've got somebody that is a general practitioner, and they've kind of have clients, they've got maybe 300 clients and spanning, they don't really have a specialty, right? They're general, and they really want to niche into something. So for us, it's real estate and estate planning attorneys. Those are the two niches that we're focused on right now. We have clients outside of that niche, and we will still work with them, but that's our wheelhouse, if that makes sense. And so let's say, you do have someone that really enjoys a niche, or it could be, I call it a segment. So maybe they want to do business, maybe they want it to be in a specific geographic location. But um, let's say someone's looking to work with hairdressers, just because I don't have any have any hair. I know a client, I know people that work with. I have a friend that's her specialty is uh, female veterinarian owners specifically. But let's say you have someone that wants to work with hairdressers or people that own salons. What steps should they take just in that beginning, as far as is from a marketing or branding, or defining their brand identity, should they think about?
That's a great question. And I think one thing that they can do really easily is go to local networking meetings. There are almost every city has BNI. They have whatever their local branded group is, and these are small business owners typically that where they'll, you know how it goes. They'll have one person from each industry as a member. Could be a breakfast meeting, could be lunch, dinner, whatever it is. Like our local BNI here, we looked at joining at one point. Actually, my son did. There was a wallpaper hanger. There was a drape salesperson. There was a vet, different lawyers, but they all specialize in different things. I guarantee you there's probably going to be a salon owner that's a member of these things as well. So by way of networking, you can actually meet some of these people that are out there. There's a rule in those groups where you don't really solicit others for business, but I think it's an unwritten rule because if you show up regularly, you're contributing to the group. Somebody's going to ask you once you give your elevator speech, which I actually have trained accountants on how to give those speeches. It's pretty scary what they come up with before we figure out how they should do it. Is you're going to meet somebody that's going to be interested in what you do. So I think that's probably a good step. Now it's going to cost you some money to join those groups, but look at it as, you'll get one engagement and it'll pay for the whole year of membership, most likely. Another thing you can do is start to ask for referrals. So I think one thing accountants, bookkeepers, CPAs, EAs are really bad about is asking for referrals. I think it has to do with the folks, everybody who's in this industry, the ability to be liked. And what I mean by that is most accountants are afraid that if they ask their client for referral, the client will be offended. Okay. And if the client is offended, then they may not be a client for very much longer. Whereas the opposite is really true because your clients want referrals just as much as you do. Now, you may not have had that conversation with a client yet about referrals, but you can have it anytime and start that. And it's basically as simple as taking a client out to breakfast or lunch or dinner, whatever, and make it clear that you're not talking about what you're doing with them in the business area, but you're going to talk about your businesses. In other words, what kind of referrals are you looking for? Where do you want to be? Those kinds of conversations. I have a great story. I had worked with a managed services company up in New Jersey that only worked with Sage clients. And so they worked with Sage, and the owner was telling me that, that their sales are off. He said, our sales are a little bit down. Do you have any ideas? What do you think? And I said, well, are your key salespeople, including you, are you meeting with their clients to talk about things other than the direct work you're doing with them? Well, why would I do that? Is what he said to me. And I said, well, it's going to help you, gain referrals from them. You can give referrals, you can get referrals. Said, oh, I'm much too busy to do that. I said, so do you eat lunch every day? Well, yeah. I said, well, then take one of your clients to lunch. I said, maybe once a month. Don't have to do it every day, but once a month. Oh, no, we can't possibly do that. Well, so he was putting up barriers in his own business for not being able to reach out and get referrals. And I think it's really just a simple conversation. It's, hey, Chris, hey, John, I'm looking for referrals. This is exactly what I'm looking for. Get very specific. If you say, I'm looking for referrals for clients in tax and accounting, that's like giving you an entire library to look through. Okay. Your entire address book, which is not going to work. You've got to get very specific. So if you've got a niche, that opens the door right away. So I'm looking for tax and accounting prospects who work in construction, who need not only the tax prep piece, but also tax planning. And that's where you can begin to talk about advisory and some of the things that, we push on a regular basis or
That's
so.
a
And
great point. I mean, because it's funny, Scott, because we have, this is not a commercial for our mastermind group, but we have a peer-to-peer mastermind group, And the topic, we meet twice a week just for an hour. And we always have a practice management topic. The topic was, why do sometimes we feel like we're not getting referrals from our clients? That's the number one place we should be getting them, right? And sometimes maybe clients don't want to give referrals because they want to hoard you. Maybe, I don't know, but I think that your good clients understand um, that you do need the lifeblood of your practice. We say, let your best client pick your next client. We always say that, and so I took that to heart, and I thought, okay, well, because quite frankly, I get to work from home. I don't like to go out to do coffee and lunch with people. I just don't like to. I'd rather just not do it, to be quite honest. But I challenged myself. I'm like, I'm going to do this, right? So one of our local clients here in Nashville, and our clients are all over the country, but we don't even have a physical office. But we do have some clients in Nashville, decent amount from personal relationships. And I went out for coffee with one of them, talked to him. We talked about family. We talked about just stuff. We talked about his situation for about 5 minutes at the end or less. Just like, hey, he asked me a couple questions, no problem. I made a couple notes, made sure that the people on our team that need to help him with that item is getting help with. No joke. 2 days later, got a referral from him for a friend of his. That I think would be a good fit.
And I'm not surprised at all. That's all it takes. And it's, like I said, I want to reiterate, they're looking for referrals just as much as you are. If you have a client that says, "Oh, we're too busy. We're too busy to even answer the phone," well, there's something not right about that. I mean, who's too busy? We do a lot of, when I do PR work with a client, no matter what kind of industry they're in, the first thing we talk about is I ask them a question. Do you want to be rich or do you want to be famous? And they're like, "Well, what do you mean by that? I don't, what do you mean by that?" Well, if you want to be famous, we do PR work for you. And that's more of a publicist role. So it's an individual, we're publicizing you only. If you want to be rich, we're publicizing you, but we're also doing your team, your company, the industry. And they're like, most people are like, "Yeah, I want to be rich. I want it to be more on the company than me." But there's some that really just prefer to do their own thing. We've had clients that have say they have plenty of business. I know they do because I've seen the numbers. Their business is really good, but they still want to get some extra PR. They want to get some extra promotion for themselves, for the people on their team, and that's when we start to work with them on, the PR side and really, hopefully, get their name out there and people can recognize that they're experts.
Mhm.
Well,
And Scott, you hit on some really good points there a little bit earlier too. Just, the mention of B&I and networking and just PR and everything, which by the way, I love that question about kind of giving them the fork of the road, right? Like, do you want to be rich and do you want to be famous? And I can almost see this with the number of times that I've asked a similar question of people. They're like, well, if I become rich, don't I become famous? Or if I'm famous, don't I become rich? It's like, it's not that easy. But back to what you were talking about with networking and just a niche and finding, a brand identity and kind of marrying it all together with that is, I can speak for 100%. When I first started our agency, I had no idea what I was doing. I had zero money to do this. I had a lot of overhead with an office and a team. And we found a group like that. And I'm going to use my wife as an example here. My wife is a introverted extrovert. And what I mean by that is she is a diehard introvert, but she's an extrovert when she has to be. I mean, to the point of she used to be a radio host in the Metro Detroit area. So you would never know that she wants to do nothing more than, you know, grab a glass of wine, slap on her glasses, some socks, and read a book, and even tell me and the kid or the dog to go away. Like, she wants to do her own thing. But groups like that, and she worked for us, is where I'm kind of going with this, is when she found a group like that, it almost forced her to get very comfortable in saying exactly what we were looking for, because the nature of that group, right, doesn't let you be broad. It doesn't let you come in as, you gave the example of an attorney. An attorney can't join a group like that, a networking group that's designed in that way, and say, "Oh, well, I'm an attorney. I take any legal cases or any legal projects." They don't let you, right? You have to specify, because there is a peer in that group that does similar. You kind of walk that line together, which those do very well. And then Chris, like you mentioned too, in the mastermind, that was a really good conversation we had with people. And almost everybody, if I remember right, they really were either they didn't feel comfortable with it or they didn't even realize that they didn't feel comfortable asking for referrals from their clients because, yeah, it seems like they hoard them. But I mean, I've seen it in my world and other people's where you could be so early in that relationship with a new client. They're so excited that they found like their guy that they do want to share it with people, whether you being their guy or not even realize it. They're like proud that they have somebody that's really good and then they love sharing it. So that's
Mhm.
it's good to hear that, you know, you brought up networking groups because that's huge too.
Yeah,
Right.
I was going to add to that. I've been a member of Vistage. I've done that. I was a member of a local networking group. We met every week, Wednesday mornings at 7 a.m., which nearly killed me in the beginning. Then it was like, oh, I'm really enjoying going to this. There were only 12 of us in the group, but each time we had to bring a guest. And what was so interesting about that group to me is I got up to do my elevator speech every time, and I'd see I call it the bobblehead, where they're nodding their head. Okay, great. Well, then it came for my time to do my big presentation. Every time they would ask one of the members to do something longer, like 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I did that. The first thing somebody said was, I didn't realize that's what you did because I had visual things to show them. Like I had magazine covers or I had articles that I had printed up into a PDF or I had, examples of PR campaigns. Like I've been saying this every week for months and you didn't realize that. No, we need to see it visually and to really understand what that is. Okay, well, that was my fault. That was my mistake because I wasn't describing it properly. After that, it got better. But, I think what's so interesting about those groups is you absolutely have to let them know what you're doing.
Absolutely. And Chris, maybe this is an example too. Like, I mean, I don't know if I'm wrong or right with this one, but you know, we just did an episode about kind of marrying financial advising into a tax practice, right? So I can almost see that being a case if somebody was in a group like that and they were, you know, we'll just say, I don't know. I don't know. I'm trying to think of the best thing. They're a tax professional, say for example, but they might be in a group like that and say there isn't somebody that does financial advising. They might be so in tune with saying, "Yep, I do taxes, I do taxes, I do taxes, I do taxes." They forget to even mention that, "Oh yeah, we also do financial advising," which again, you can't really cross that line in some of those groups, but gosh, if you went in there and said, you know, Chris, your example, you said, "You know what? I do taxes. I'm not going to get into a lot of detail about it, but yes, I'm looking for women-owned veterinary clinics." I feel like that like etches itself in somebody's mind where they're like, "Oh yeah, you do taxes, but yes, you work with veterinary clinics that are women-owned," and then immediately their brain kind of goes off and starts thinking, "Do I know anybody like that?" Where if you just say you do taxes, right? They're like, "Oh yeah, so does Susan on the corner, so does Mike, so does the guy dressed in the costume here, you know, running around the corner next to the Burger King," and it just becomes so vague that, you know, you almost for in an industry term, it's like you start to diminish your brand equity because you're the same as everybody else, right?
Well, and I think what's so interesting nowadays, and I know, Chris, you do a lot of this, is the advisory side. And what's so interesting to me is probably 25 years ago, I was 5 years into my business. I was already working with an accountant to do my taxes. I was sole proprietor. My mistake. I should have been an S corp, and I had somebody hammer it into me so many times. Finally, I became one. I saved all that money on self-employment taxes. It's just ridiculous, but finally did that. But I had this relationship with a CPA firm, and it was a firm I knew when I was at the TSCPA. They were local, and I would say, we get our taxes done every year, and I would say, "Is there anything else you want to tell me?" And the CPA would always say, "Well, what is it you want to know? We did your taxes." It's like, "Well, you've seen my tax return. You've known me for quite a while now. Is there something you want to advise me that I should be doing for my business?" Well, you know way more about what we do than we think we do. So you tell us what you want to know. What? What? Okay, so that doesn't even make sense. Now fast forward to today, and a CPA or an accountant who is not working with their clients in an advisory capacity is going to be out of work, because we know the tax return is going to be commoditized. It just is. I mean, that AI is already moving toward that. And I think that's a really good use of AI, the way it's working with tax return prep. But it's the planning, it's the really having a conversation with the business owner to say, okay, so did you add, I see, your payroll is increased for tax year 24. How many staff did you add? You will probably already know that, but how many staff did you add, let's just say? And okay, so are you getting the most out of that staff? Well, so all of a sudden you're an HR director, right? So you've got to wear all those hats. You've got to be, say, okay, is your return rate working on adding that other person or adding that new position? Are you seeing some benefit from that? And if the answer is, well, no, they're not really busy all the time and I'm not quite sure what to do with them, well, then that's to me, a clear answer. Get rid of that person. Find somebody to take on whatever work that was. But you can see where I'm going with this. In other words, you've got to have that advisory conversation nowadays as a CPA, accountant, even a bookkeeper. A bookkeeper who just does the books is fine, and there's a lot of business owners who just want that. But wouldn't it be great for that bookkeeper to say, give them one little nugget to say, you know, uh, if you actually invest your money this way, I think you get a greater return on it. Why not?
One of the things you mentioned, just kind of thinking about, the going beyond just cranking out what you're supposed to be doing. So, and if you find yourself, you're listening to this and you're a tax and accounting professional, and we have bookkeepers listen also, or people that do a lot of bookkeeping or payroll. We kind of, John knows this, like in our practice, gosh, it might have been 10 years ago, maybe 11, we banished what's called the B word. Now, the B word isn't what you think of the B word is, like a really bad word. The B word is a 4-letter word, and I even have problems saying it now, but it's busy. I don't like that term because if you think you're too busy for something, or your clients, hey, how's it going? If you say, oh, we're super busy, what in the heck is that telling your clients? That's telling them, I don't have time for you, and I don't have time for anyone else right now. That's on you. You designed your practice to do that, so you've got to reanalyze and and tweak things and become more efficient. Instead, say business is great, but we're always taking on some more. How can we help you? Just it's that that framing of what you're how you're speaking with your clients, and then that could lead you to getting more referrals. I want to go back, because I mentioned, because I'm going to walk into, we were talking about someone just starting out. I was part of BNI, gosh, 22 years ago. It was a little, at this point where I'm at, it's not the best fit for me, but having a networking group of some type is a really good fit. So getting involved, finding a group that meets, asking for referrals is important, but also being very specific, being as specific as you can is very important. So I'm looking for I'm looking for I'm looking for people that invest in real estate and need help with their taxes or tax planning. Okay, I'm looking for someone that owns a real estate brokerage, or I'm looking for you can get, like you said, Scott, get very specific, and that's going to guide you to, again, let your best client pick your next client. And if you're just starting off, or if you kind of are a general practitioner, we're not saying go ditch all your clients. What I'm saying is maybe create a separate segment or service if you want to start implementing tax planning and strategy, and saying, hey, we're gonna start rolling out now. Scott, as you know, we're membership based, but we're gonna start rolling out a tax planning service, and would be very interested in, if you're interested in that. Here's the process, um, and be, and as accountants, we can tend to be rigid a little bit. So understand that what you set up today is not what it's going to be in a month, and 2 months, 3 months. My whole sales or client acquisition process changes fluidly based on dashboards, and saying, okay, well, hey, we're getting a lot of, John knows this, right? We're having a lot of success here. let's tweak this process here. And we've changed it now where I'm kind of an ambassador. And I'm talking to people right off the bat about, because I'll challenge tax professionals. How quickly do you know if someone could be a good client? Truly, you typically know within 10 minutes. That's being generous. 5 to 10 minutes. Then why are you meeting with people, looking at tax returns and doing all this mumbo jumbo, quoting people when you think at the end, they're not going to be a good client? Have a 10-minute conversation right up front. Have a way to book it that works for them. Have it as a phone call, chat through it, and okay, I think we should move forward. So that's just, my 2 cents on
Yeah.
it.
I think there's a couple of things to take away there. I think that's all great. COVID killed the in-person meeting. It did. I mean, unfortunately, it really did. Now, our business did really well during COVID because, again, one reason I've stayed in tax and accounting is it's fairly recessionary proof. So when there's a recession, when there's a downturn, there's always tax stuff going on. Right now, we don't know what the current administration's going to be doing with tax moving forward. We think there's going to be stuff. We just don't know what that is. But COVID killed that networking meeting, like that coffee meeting you want to have with somebody once a week. I've seen that go in the opposite direction, of course. That's coming back. One practitioner I know still schedules, she calls them 10-minute coffee talks. She'll schedule just a 10-minute Zoom with somebody, and she'll reach out. She'll network, or they'll network with her. And it's just a 10-minute, let me get to know you, kind of like a speed dating thing. And if we think there's some cross-pollination here, let's talk further, but I think that's a really good way of doing that. If you are that, person that doesn't like to get out and meet with people, and there certainly are, I'm just like your wife. I am I'm very much that way. So I will probably prefer to be on the side of a mountain somewhere than being where I am, looking out at very tall buildings. But this is where I am, and I force myself to be an extrovert. I say that, kind of jokingly. People think I'm an extrovert naturally, and it's just really not the case. I'm the one that wants to go read the book.
She refers to it as it's the hardest workout she could get in a day is her trying to be in a meeting with a large group of people and all the attention being on her. I'm like, I could see that. I could see that.
That's tough. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Scott.
Yeah, I was just to say, one thing I learned a long time ago is really you've got something to offer these anybody you're meeting with. You've got something really valid to offer, and that's an expert opinion about something. If you didn't, you wouldn't be having the meeting in the first place. You wouldn't have even set up the meeting. So when you look at it that way, even though you're an introvert, which I know a lot of financial people are, make time for those things. Get out, get those referrals, meet with people, join a group. Doesn't have to be a large group. It could be a small group. It could be something once a month, for lunch, or whatever the case is. Just find your place and do it. And, like meetups are a great place for that. Now, I don't know, some meetups are greater than others. It depends on your niche and what you want to do, but that certainly is a good place to start as well.
Right. And if you are introverted, and I'm not necessarily introverted, I just don't really feel like putting pants and a real shirt on and going and meeting people. Hopefully one option is, which I've used a ton, is use videos. I've started doing this. If you've got some good, if you're looking to grow your business and get some new really quality clients, pick your best 5 clients out. You can use Loom or something. Loom's got a free subscription. Record yourself a 4 to 5 minute video and send it to them, talking about, hey, I hope your year's off to a good start. We just said, we're looking forward to preparing your tax return. I see some opportunities for you, tax planning wise later on this year. We are taking on some new clients. Since I really enjoy working with you, our team really enjoys working with you, I thought I'd let you know that. And if you know anyone that does please let me know. Now the spotlight's not on you, and that's a way kind of in this non face-to-face meeting environment to feel personalized still. So
I think that's a great idea.
And Scott, you're definitely right, man. COVID shifted the the activities, right? Like it was almost, if you didn't do in person, a lot of people kind of looked at like, oh, well, Zoom is kind of a shortcut or a cop out, right? Where now I find it more often if you try to schedule an in-person meeting with somebody, sometimes they're annoyed by it. They're like, oh, what? Like, but other people love it, right? And I know we only have a couple more minutes left really on this specific topic, and we'll have to have another discussion with you too. But there's just so much stuff out there, right? So many, we'll say so many tools, technology, AI, all these things that obviously you can get kind of overwhelmed with everything and all the opportunities to do everything around marketing and just everything there. Or where I think trying to find, yes, where you're comfortable with, but also, where you're not comfortable. Like if you're not comfortable getting out there and doing some networking, I can say this from the marketing side, right? Of talking to clients in the past where sometimes they kind of live in their world so much that they never have to say what they do until they're forced to say it. Like say there's an economic downturn and their industry is really hit hard and then they're like, "Oh crap, now I need to market." They don't even know what their brand voice is, right? So, I mean, not saying my advice too, but I'd love to hear your opinion for tax professionals specifically, right? Like it's been pretty sweet for a little bit and it's, the clients seem to kind of roll in a lot for people. And sometimes firms have more clients than they know what to do with, but then other ones are kind of struggling to find their niche, or they're just getting into it, maybe leaving a larger firm, going out on their own, kind of left to their own devices. Where the earlier on, right, you find out what your messaging is, what your brand voice is, who you're after, kind of the better. And going through those networking exercises, we'll call it, kind of forces you to define how you say that. And then say, for example, you go to run a ad campaign or do anything, a little bit more what you want to say instead of, well, I do taxes. What else do you need to know about me? Right. Like, do you agree with that? Or have you seen that in the past or
Oh,
no?
I have definitely. Yeah. And I always say the best time to market yourself is when you're the busiest because you really feel good about what you're doing. And if I encounter a prospect or a client that says, again, I'm just too busy to get out there and do anything right now, well, you're really not. I mean, people who say they're too busy, I can't possibly call you back until a week from Wednesday. Well, really? I mean, that's just ludicrous. It's ridiculous. Make time. People, it's all, I think it all boils down to priorities. It's a priority if you're going to make time to do something because you're going to get something out of that. Uh, I think that that's a very key thing. And CPAs ask me all the time, how much time should I be spending on social media? Because social media is a way to market yourself. We know that, right? So I say, if you could just do 10 minutes every morning, focus on probably LinkedIn more than anything else, but you want to focus on the social media where your clients are. So like if you are looking for hairdressers or looking for a salon, for example, like we talked about, Chris, they're probably on Instagram. They're not going to be on X. I mean, forget X. They're not going to be there. They may have a Facebook page that they use to set appointments or they could sell something on there. But the reality is they're probably going to be on Instagram. So go where they're going to be. And again, you could use hashtags and you could use a lot of ways to get them to come follow you and, do video, do postings, do a lot of stuff. But spend about 10 minutes a day. I always say do it in the morning when you're fresh. You come in, you get it done. As far as CPAs on LinkedIn, I always say, find groups to join, be part of, comment on something. Just don't lurk. Just don't sit there and not do anything and not comment on something. Be an active participant, and people will start recognizing you as that individual who probably knows what they're talking about, and then they'll start connecting to you. But you can also reach out and connect to people. So why not? I mean, the LinkedIn is free unless you have the super duper version. I've never had that, and I've never missed having it. So to me, do it. It's free. Why
Hmm.
not?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's great advice. And as we wrap it up, Scott, and gosh, there's a lot of other things we could talk about, but let's talk. Let's finish up by. Could you give someone one, two, or three, just kind of tidbits? You just gave us one on the LinkedIn. I agree. Um, just starting to comment and network there. But maybe a couple more tips for tax and accounting pros. as far as to kind of telling their story. And then finally, are you taking on new clients? I know you work with the Intuits and some amazing companies out in the world, but are you taking on new projects and clients in your private practice?
Always taking them on. Yeah. Capacity is not an issue. If Because in a PR agency or a firm like we have, you can always grow by either adding staff, adding part-timers, or adding contractors. So yes, absolutely. But they'll always get my brand on things. In other words, I'm not handing them off to a junior where they're never going to see me again. They're always working with me and the team. So absolutely, always taking on new clients and always wanting to have those conversations, because I think they're interesting conversations to have. The work may not be compatible, or we may pass, or they may pass on us, but I'd love to have those conversations always. Back to the tips, I think one thing I would recommend is definitely be authentic. And when I say that, I mean really be true to your story. Don't be put on just because you think your prospect or your client wants you to be that way. Chris, you're a great example. John, I don't know you that well, but I'd like to. You guys are a great example of really, really saying what you mean. Like, you don't want to get dressed up every day and go into an office. You want to be what you are. I have an office simply because it was a way to save the relationship at home. Otherwise, we would have killed each other. So, yeah. So, I mean, that's really why I have an office, and my son is here with me too, so I get to see him every day. But what I say is, really be authentic, be true to yourself. If you don't want to take on certain work, don't do it. If you really want to go with your gut feel on a prospect or with a client. The other advice I would give is, if you're a tax professional, is don't think you have to do everything at once as far as marketing goes. Find 2 or 3 things to do and do them slowly, but do them well. And what I mean by that is, there's a lot to do nowadays with marketing. There's social media, there's blogs, there's writing for websites, writing for your clients, your managed service providers. There is paid ads. There's pay-per-click still. That's still a thing. There's wanting to be on the first page of search when you search on Google. There's all these things going on. There's speaking, there's presentations, there's conferences. Find 2 or 3 of those things and tackle them. Set yourself some goals, some short-term goals, maybe some long-term, but I think long-term goals get misfired. I think you really need to look at short-term and say, okay, in the next 6 months, I'm going to write 3 articles. I'm going to try to network with 10 people, and I'm going to I'm going to do something else, whatever that something else is, because that's attainable. If you do a goal that's not attainable, you're going to feel like you failed.
Excellent advice. And the good thing about that too is that goes across all industries and all professionals, not even necessarily just tax professionals. So, Scott, we're gonna have to have you back on, man. I know there's a million other topics I think we can touch on, and it's nice sometimes to have somebody on here that also can't file a tax return. So that makes me and you. We leave it to guys like Chris. So, and thank you, honestly, thank you, and for making the time for us. I know you and Chris have known each other for a bit, so it's great to have a conversation with you as well.
Well, I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. And again, now we're putting the hook in you so everybody knows it. We're going to have you back on. So it's out there in the ecosphere, so we have to make it happen. So
Sounds good.
And if anybody who's listening to this has those ideas, anything you want to hear, send them over to us. We'd love to hear it. Join those online communities. We'll put some links here in the show notes as well. Just put yourself out there. Like Scott had mentioned, and we had a discussion around, the best thing you can do for yourself is just get out there, practice, refine your message, and tell people who you're looking for. So as always, we'll see everybody back here again on the Mr. R Show.
You've been listening to the Mr. R Show, presented by the MRR Institute. For more content like this, be sure to check us out on YouTube for weekly expert tips. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast to stay updated on the latest strategies for scaling and modernizing your tax practice. Looking for more? Contact us at mrrinstitute.com for practice resources, coaching opportunities, and a peer-to-peer mastermind group. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
The content of this podcast does not constitute an offer of securities. Offerings can only be made through an offering memorandum, and you should carefully examine the risk factors and other information contained in the memorandum. The content provided is for educational purposes only. We encourage you to seek personalized investment advice from your financial professional. For all tax and legal advice, please consult your CPA or attorney. Investment advisory services are offered through Cabin Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Securities are offered through Cabin Securities, a registered broker-dealer.